My name is Diana Ingram, and I am the Executive Director of Hill Center at the Old Naval Hospital. For those of you who don't know our physical plant, the Old Naval Hospital is a Civil War era hospital commissioned by Abraham Lincoln, and in fact was the very first naval hospital to be built in Washington, D.C. We miss seeing you in person and in our beautiful historic building. Welcome to the inaugural and virtual edition of Meet the Ambassador. Many thanks to Governor Blanchard for agreeing to serve as host, and to executive producer Rosemary Freeman for creating such a wonderful new program for Hill Center audiences. Please be sure to check out all the super things that are happening for the time being virtually at Hill Center, but hopefully soon to be in person. The best bet is our weekly e-blast and our website. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Governor Jim Blanchard. He is a former member of Congress from the great state of Michigan and a two-term governor of the state. He also served as the US Ambassador to Canada under the Clinton administration. During his tenure as ambassador, he managed a broad remit of trade, natural resources, environmental, and national security issues between the US and Canada, providing critical support to the passage of NAFTA and the Open Skies Agreement. He is also the author of a book about his time in Canada called Behind the Embassy Door, which makes him uniquely qualified to interview our guest, Her Excellency Kirsten Hillman, Canadian Ambassador to the United States. So over to you, Jim.
Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
Diana Ingram, I want to thank you for allowing me to host this, and to Rosemary Freeman, my longtime colleague, for helping arrange all this. I'm really happy to do it. You know, this is the first of a series of ambassadors, Meet Ambassador programs, and no better country to start with than the ambassador from Canada to the US. I think, and I'm going to look here, it was February 23rd that President Biden said, the US has no closer relationship and no more important friend than Canada. Indeed, we concur with that. I remember being in Ottawa in December 2016, right before President Obama and Vice President Biden left office. Prime Minister Trudeau hosted a dinner honoring Joe Biden, and what a wonderful way for his relationship with Prime Minister Trudeau to commence. It was really, really exciting. By the way, there were three former prime ministers there, not just the current prime minister, Justin Trudeau. You know, I've actually known over the years, believe it or not, I'm old enough to have known 11 former ambassadors to the United States from Canada, and I work with 8 of them. And I can tell you this, because I know for a fact, Canada sends its very best representatives to Washington to be their envoy. And our current ambassador now, Kirsten Hillman, is it fits that to a T. But she's actually unique in several ways, which is, you know, important and significant. She happens to be the first woman ambassador to the US, but Ambassador Hillman also really earned her stripes in the trenches. She was not a career foreign service officer or an elected politician. Several of my colleagues in Canada were premiers of provinces. No, she actually was a practicing attorney in Montreal, and then was in the Department of Justice in Ottawa, and then had major positions in Global Affairs Canada. And I want to make sure I get these right. She's not only been the ambassador to the US officially for a little more than a year, but before that, she was deputy ambassador. But before that, she was a key trade negotiator. She was assistant deputy minister of trade agreements and negotiations. She was the chief negotiator for Canada for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We may want to talk about that. She was also the senior legal advisor at the World Trade Organization in Geneva. We have someone here who has done all the work in the trenches, produced results beneficial not only to Canada, but to the US and to our allies around the world. And so it's really nice to see someone who's been rewarded for their hard work, their skill, and their knowledge. And so I want to welcome Ambassador Kirsten Hillman. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Governor. And it's a delight to be here with you. And thank you for that very kind introduction. I think the image of me in the trenches is probably one that is quite apt. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Well, that's what catapulted you, I think, into this really important position. And, you know, I want to talk about substance, but I also want to talk about, you know, how an ambassador lives, how, you know, how things go, because I know when I was an ambassador, I was asked a lot of those questions. So my first question is, and we'll go through a lot of stuff, is when you were a young woman, did you ever think, or a young girl for that matter, did you ever think you might grow up to be an ambassador, like to a major country?
No, I think the very clear answer to that is no. I think that as a young girl, as a matter of fact, you know, elementary and middle school age, my dream was to be a ballerina. And you can't tell because I'm sitting down, but I'm a very tall person, about over 5'10", and that didn't make for a very likely career in the ballet. So, and also, to be perfectly frank, I just maybe wasn't that talented. But that was my dream, and I worked very hard at that for a while, and then moved on. And as a young woman, as a young professional, as you said in your introduction, I'm a lawyer. I defended Canada and before the WTO and NAFTA panels, and then transitioned into being a trade negotiator and trade advisor, running all of our trade policy for the federal government. So I really thought that was my career. Loved that career. But it did afford me the opportunity to get to know Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Harper before him very well, and I think that's ultimately, you know, why I've ended up here where I am.
Well, I think too, I think the prime minister always wants to feel they know the ambassador and can call them and have a candid conversation. And they have that trust, which is really important. I'm sure glad, and I'm sure that's why you were named ambassador. I should mention in the book Last Hope Island by Lynn Olson, great book, it talks about a young ballerina in the Netherlands during World War II, Audrey Hepburn, running messages for her brother who was involved with the underground fighting the Nazis. So ballerinas evolved to a lot of different things. Ambassador, let me ask you about the Prime Minister Trudeau, who I know has great faith in you. His recent meeting with Joe Biden went really well, as I understand it.
It was fantastic. You know, actually, I can say that from the first moments of this administration taking office, we have had incredible engagement and contact. So I had the privilege of being at the inauguration. And for those of you who know Washington, our embassy is very close to the Capitol. Before I was even able to get back to my office after the inauguration, we had phone calls coming in from the White House, from senior members of the White House, wanting to talk to me and wanting to talk to senior members of the Prime Minister's office that very day. Not just to say hello and you know, we're happy to be here and can't wait to work together, but to actually get down to substance and to talk about some of the things that we had been seeking and through other channels, telling them that we really wanted to get to work on really quickly. So from that very moment, literally hours after they took office, we started working on very substantive matters. And that led it to this, you know, the first phone call between the Prime Minister and the President just a few days after the inauguration. And then in February, this incredibly substantive meeting that we had between the leaders, first a private meeting and then one that involved many members of both cabinets. And it wasn't a meeting to just say, you know, great to be here. What are you thinking about? What are we thinking about? It was a very serious working meeting that resulted in a document that the leaders tasked essentially to their two governments that contained literally dozens of projects that ministers and other agencies within our systems are accountable for. Dozens.
They were
It's
talking,
incredible.
right? Kind of a roadmap of
Yeah, it's called the Canada-US Roadmap, and it's a document that's meant to set a vision for our relationship over the next several years. And it's, of course, it discusses COVID and economic recovery, but it also talks about climate change and continental defense, working on law enforcement, fighting extremism, cooperating internationally in various international fora. It's just incredibly comprehensive. For anyone who is interested in the Canada-US relationship, I commend it to you. It's quite significant, very weighty, and I think provides a really optimistic and as I say, substantive vision for our two countries in the next couple of years.
Right. What a lot of our viewers here are people who are really into public service. They're into government, international affairs. They have a high regard for public servants. We even have some people from the Canadian Studies program at Michigan State University. They're all very much aware that Canada is a different country, a sovereign country. But no one ever realizes how many issues we deal with in Canada. They have no idea that it's everything from space station to agriculture to, the Great Lakes to energy to trade to NORAD, NATO. They have no idea the width and breadth. And so helping manage that, which you do really, is a huge job. And I take it people are already getting to work on this roadmap because there's just so many people that are needed in both our governments.
Yeah, you know what, I really like the way you've characterized that, because one of the things that I didn't really appreciate until I was sitting here in Washington, which I'm sure you came to appreciate when you were sitting in Ottawa, was the literally hundreds of thousands of interactions that Canadians and Americans have every day. And many of those are our public servants, our governments, whether it's municipal or provincial or federal, on issues, all the kinds of issues that you raised, everything from defending our homeland, right, our joint homeland, working in the Arctic, to environment, to all of these issues. But also it's just people, right? It's students, and it's businesses, and it's families, and it's travelers, and there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Canadians and Americans that are interacting with each other every day on issues that aren't really international issues. And one of the things that I find really interesting when I get together with my fellow ambassadors here in Washington is that most of them, in their dealings with the American government, deal primarily with the State Department. And they deal primarily with cooperating with the United States on international matters at the G7, in NATO, on climate change. For Canada, of course, we do all of that too. But frankly, the bulk of what I spend my time on, and I bet was the same for you, is what Condoleezza Rice once called condo issues. In other words, the issues that come up between partners who live next door to each other, right? And who share waterways, and who share air, and who share the need to defend each other, and who share a deep social and even personal family integration. And so Canada-US policy is really, in large part, an extension of both of our domestic policies, which is really incredible and rich and fantastic.
Yeah, you get every international issue and every domestic issue, and we always have some minor disagreements, but they're blown out of proportion because it's Canada, especially up north, but even down here, agricultural issues, lumber. I won't even dwell on that because the relationship is so multifaceted, so overarching. I mean, going back to, well, really hundreds, actually a couple hundred years, but especially intensely in the 20th century, especially since World War II. But I wanted to backtrack with Prime Minister Trudeau, since he has such great faith in you. Did you ever meet his dad, Pierre Trudeau? So that was kind of a legendary figure when I was growing up and in Congress, and I had a thrill of course, getting to know him when I was ambassador. But you're a lot younger, so I don't assume that you've met him.
So I don't know, you could tell me if this constitutes meeting him. I went to law school in Montreal, and I had an apartment that was very close to the faculty of law in Montreal. The prime minister, former prime minister at the time, had his house was not far away, a few blocks away from my apartment. And I would say maybe 3 or 4 times in the course of living in that apartment, I would be walking either to the faculty or to the grocery store, or who knows where, and I would cross him. I would pass him on the street. And I was, you know, a young woman, and I was a fan. And so I would say hello, and he would say hello. And then, you know, I'd see him again and I'd say hello. And then we'd sometimes, how are you? And so we had, let us say, exchanges of maybe in total 30 words. So I'm not sure that constitutes meeting him, but I've talked to him. Let's say that.
Well, if you were in America, you'd say you were a close friend. You met him, and I was so excited to meet him when we went up there the first few months. And our consul general, has a residence on Redpath Crescent, right up that hill from where Pierre Trudeau was living. And so we had him for dinner and different things. So it was really exciting. You know, that's nice about diplomacy and politics. If you hang around long enough, you get to meet all the people you admire. Let me ask you this, in terms of admiring, other than Prime Minister Trudeau and current Prime Minister, when you look at the sweep of history in Canada or the world, do you have any heroes that you think about, or role models or anything like that inspire you?
I do. I have Canadian heroes, and then I have, you know, heroes in the world. I find that the people I admire most are those who have an issue or a cause, something that they are deeply, you know, committed to, and they work at that, and they sacrifice to try and advance their issue. So in Canada, I'm very proud of the women across our country, well over 100 years ago now, who were suffragettes. Canada, we celebrated 100 years of women having the vote back in the first. So it was done regionally by province. The first province, a woman named Nellie McClung from Manitoba, where I was born, achieved women's suffrage in 100 years ago in 2018, so 1918. And I was recently talking to some European colleagues, and they were talking about, you know, 60 years ago and I can't remember which country it was, but women got the vote. And I'm very proud of that. I felt very proud of our efforts of Canadian women doing that. And there are many, you know, there are many other examples of Canadians. I admire Prime Minister Trudeau Sr., Pierre Trudeau, for the work that he did to repatriate our Constitution, to bring it from England back into Canada, and create our Charter of Rights, which is a fundamental document that is part of our Constitution that expresses Canadian values and is central now to how we govern. Those are the kinds of things that I believe in governance and civil society, and people participating in civil society, or in political life, people from civil society participating in political life. So those tend to be the kinds of people that I deeply admire.
At work, is there such a thing? I mean, with COVID-19, I'll back up. You have a fabulous office with the best view in town overlooking the Capitol. I've been there many times and really wish I'd had that office, not the one I had in Ottawa, although Ottawa was great. And then you have, and the whole embassy there, the building is fabulous. And then you have a residence up in Northwest Washington, which is also wonderful, with a great staff, by the way. I still see them when I go to events, and they're also friendly. But you have these incredible facilities to host conferences, meetings, speeches, fora, and social events. You can't really use that during COVID-19. You've only been the official ambassador for 13 months. You were deputy ambassador, but what do you do with all? Isn't that frustrating? I mean, I want the people to know, if you ever get an invitation to the Canadian Embassy, you better do it or you are a complete idiot, just so you know. But what do you do now? Socialize. What do you do?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. I am incredibly proud of our embassy, and I can't even express how privileged I feel to be able to go into that incredible building. I actually work from the residence. Well, now maybe about half time, but at different moments in COVID, almost full time. I'm actually at the residence right now in my little studio at the residence and not at the embassy, although I do go in, I've been in a few times this week. So it's true. Normally, so we're the busiest embassy in our network. I'm sure that people can understand that. We're the busiest embassy on the globe for events for the Canadian government. We have upwards of 400 different events a year. And when you think you don't count weekends and you don't count, usually we don't do things on a Friday because people don't tend to come to things on Friday. That's a lot of events. It's often 2, 3, 4 things going on every single day. So we have an incredible team that put together these events and support them. And we have such a dynamic, I mean, at any one time, there's just so many things going on that are so interesting and important in our premises. So we all miss that terribly. We really do. And there's been a real transition to trying to figure out how to connect with the people we want to work with and talk to virtually. And as we all know, it's not ideal. I mean, we're muddling our way through, as everybody is, but we will be very happy to be able to, look face to face at our friends and partners and as soon as possible, and to take advantage of that glorious space. One of my favorite, I mean, there's so many great things, but one of my favorite events that we do at the embassy is Canada Day. And we tend to like to have a fairly light-hearted National Day celebration. So we like people to bring their children, and we like to have it quite happy and light. We always bring musicians in from Canada that are maybe, Celtic musicians or country musicians, just people that get your toes tapping. And so Canada Day is on July 1st. We often do it in the morning because otherwise it gets a bit hot. And we serve pancakes and we serve, breakfast foods, and we have dancing. And I remember I think it was my first year here. There were these 6 little girls that were daughters of some of our guests. And they were like twirling and dancing and tapping their toes and painting their faces. And we had a little photo booth, and they're getting it was just glorious. So I like all of the formal sort of ambassador fancy stuff, but I really, really, really like the fun, family-oriented things as well.
Yeah. I've been to a few of those and had the pancakes. Yeah, it's great. And the weather normally is very good. The truth is, Janet and I never turned down an invitation from the Canadian Embassy, from the ambassador. Hint, hint. Unless we're really, really out of town, maybe out of the country, but it's always a delight. Let me see what I wanted to. I'm trying to think of. I've got so many questions here, and I want to move along. But I did ask you if you have such a thing as an average day. Do you get up and call the Prime Minister, or do you wait for him to call you?
So I don't have an average day. There is no such thing as an average day. I think that, and I do, speak to the Prime Minister fairly often, actually. And I certainly speak to his office and his senior staff probably every day, almost every day. I see this job as having kind of 2 levels to it. There's one level at which I feel my responsibility is to help the Prime Minister and his cabinet and his senior staff conceive of and develop a vision for Canada-US relations overall, sort of a broad, where are we going? What are the opportunities? How can we work together? How can we support each other? What does this moment in time mean for our relationship? And how can we use this moment in time to deepen it and strengthen it and all of that? So it's kind of a broad thematic. And the roadmap is very much the articulation of that. And then, at that level, we're always working. And then one of the things about this job, which is, I think, unique compared to all of the people that work with me here at the embassy and across our US network, is that it's also just very issues based. So at any one day, there will be one or two key issues that require attention. And so, and then maybe that requires me to talk to some senators, or maybe that requires me to make a call to the White House, or maybe that requires me to make a call to a minister in Canada and talk things through, or a Canadian, CEO, or whatever the case may be, depending on the issue. I talk to governors, I talk to premiers, it just depends on what it is that is going on. And so it's a issues management, issues advancement, finding ways to sort of advance the Canadian interests, protect the Canadian interests, and develop relationships and partners so that I can achieve that.
Yeah, and you mentioned we were talking about the range of issues and the interaction you've mentioned. When I served in Ottawa, our embassy there and yours, those are the busiest embassies in the world. Everybody thought it might be London or Tokyo or Paris, which are very important, as you know. But actually, Canada and Mexico were the busiest embassies for a lot of reasons. And Canada, more especially because of the national security arrangements, and other issues. But it's interesting. Let me ask you about this, because you really did it along with the U.S. trade rep. But are you happy with the new U.S. Mexico Canada trade agreement, which did pass with bipartisan support? Are you happy with that modernization of NAFTA?
Yes, I'm happy with it. I think it's a good agreement for both our countries, or all three of our countries. I think that people have to recognize that the original NAFTA, and you know this very well, it was concluded a long time ago. It was concluded before we had an internet, right? So the way businesses do business now is incredibly different. And we needed this arrangement underpins the majority of international economic activity for all three of our countries. And all three of our countries had kind of gone on and made more modern arrangements with other countries. And so it made no sense whatsoever for us not to have the most modern, up-to-date arrangement between the three of us. So I'm very proud of the advancements, the modernizations that were made. I'm also very proud of the fact that it achieved bipartisan support. And in doing that, it required some choices and some additions to be made to the agreement, which Canada was very, very happy with in relation to workers' rights, workers' protections, environmental protections, enforceable environmental norms, which were things that are very important to our government and were very important to the Democrats. And so we have a very modernized agreement that also brings in issues that our citizens care an awful lot about when it comes to how trade works in a region like North America. And I also think, again, you highlighted the bipartisan support. Ultimately, one of the biggest values that we get from an international trade agreement, in addition to the rules and sort of setting a level playing field for the three countries, is consistency and predictability. So businesses know the rules of the road today, tomorrow, and the next day, and that they can make investments and they can take some of the business risks that we need them to take in order to grow our economies. And so having an agreement that in the United States achieved that level of bipartisan support, I think makes us all feel comfortable that it has an enduring value. It may not, it may not last another 25 years. So we have mechanisms in there to update it more regularly. But I think having an agreement that has a national consensus around it, which it also had in Canada, I think is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the border. By the way, I'm just reading that the percentage of people vaccinated in Canada is a lot lower than we wish. It's still too low here. But how is that working? I mean, when do you think we're going to open up our borders? The busiest crossing for our viewers is Detroit-Windsor. And the greatest number of interactions are Michigan, Ontario, and parts east. By far, I might add. In fact, we have a new bridge. You may want to talk about the Gordie Howe International Bridge. It's being built. But going back to COVID, what are we going to do? How are we going to open up? I mean, I've got all these friends with cottages and they can't go there. If they're an essential worker like healthcare or doing the supply chain for autos, they can go back and forth, but they have to be quarantined. And what do you think is going to happen?
You know, the border is a topic that I discuss every single day here with Ottawa, with our health officials, with our border officials, with stakeholders here in the United States, with the Hill, with the administration. I think that I mean the first thing I'd like to say is that the restrictions that were put in place on non-essential travel were really designed to help us control the virus and keep people, in place while we put the health measures in place. And they have succeeded in doing that. And at the same time, the measures were designed to allow commerce to flow so that we could support our economies, right? While we were suffering these very challenging health times. And they've also succeeded in doing that. And just as maybe this is of interest to your viewers, the Canada-US border under normal times has over 400,000 crossings a day, 400,000 crossings a day, business land border in the world. We have managed to essentially stop non-essential travel, but commercial travel has only declined by about 15% over pre-COVID times. And when you think about the degree of slowdown in our economies, that's a remarkable thing. And it goes to the deep participation and cooperation between our communities, our border services, and our businesses. So I would just like to give them a shout out for what is a success. Now, along with the success, of course, has come really challenging times for people, for families. You mentioned property owners, just for people who want to get back to the regular rhythm of life between our two countries. And that will come, but it can only come when we're sure that we have done the job as governments of protecting our people. So Canada, in Ontario, in Quebec, and in other parts of our country, we are really experiencing a very serious surge because of new variants. And we know that's true in Michigan as well. And so until those surges are brought under control, until we know our people are safe, until we know our hospitals can manage this virus and that people aren't going to be, we're not overburdening the system, we have to keep these measures in place. So when they will be changed, when we will evolve into something more open, will be completely defined by the facts on the ground, right? Our scientists, what they're telling us, our experts, how they're advising us. The president and the prime minister agreed explicitly to try and coordinate on reopening of the border, but they also agreed explicitly that in making those decisions, they will be guided by the science, the advice of experts, and fundamentally, and most importantly, protecting, our citizens. So we have to see what's happening with the virus. We have to get those vaccines into people's arms. You're right, Canada's behind in terms of percentage of our population from the United States. We are ramping it up, but we really need to get those vaccines in arms across both of our countries.
There are several, I want to mention to our audience, wouldn't know this, there are several thousand nurses and healthcare workers who live in Ontario in the Windsor area who cross over every day and work in our hospitals and our doctors' offices. And your consul general there, Joe Cole-Martin, who's very good, helps facilitate all that. But that's been going on. We have doctors that are crossing and going into Ontario as well. So those are called essential services. But by the way, I have a nephew who's at the University of Toronto, and he's a dual citizen because my brother-in-law and others were born in Canada. So he's loving it there, but he had to quarantine for 2 weeks before he could start school. But it's worked out really well. But I mean, those are the kind of connections in Michigan. By the way, you mentioned you deal with governors. You have a very good relationship, as I know, with Governor Whitmer. Are there other governors you've spoken to recently? I know with Governor Whitmer, it's a good relationship, but are there others that you want to mention, just so I know? And we all...
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yes, I do have a good relationship with her. I admire her as a leader of her state. I've spoken to Governor Inslee a few times. We've got some important cooperation to do out on the West Coast.
Washington.
Yeah, in Washington State, that's right. And I had, worked with a few other governors, obviously in our region here. We work very closely with Governor Horgan, and he's also someone who we've seen a lot. He was the head of the National Governors Association the year before last, and so we worked with him in conjunction with some things that we did when all the governors were together, but also just on a sort of on a regular basis. We work with him a fair bit. So yeah, no, there are a few, and also my consuls general, of course, across the country have good, strong relationships with their governors as well.
How many consuls general do you have?
We have 9.
Mhm. Yeah, and the one in Detroit, Joko Martin, has Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and it's probably the busiest consulate because of the flow of goods and services and people, but they're all important. Like, people wouldn't think, but Los Angeles is very busy. There's huge number of Canadians in California, right?
Yeah, they're huge. You know what? We have 13 because I was counting California as one, but we actually now have 3 different consuls general in California. So we have 13 consuls general.
And you've invaded the last, I don't know how many years, 75 years. So it isn't just Saturday Night Live your people control and dominate, and I might say brilliantly, but Hollywood as well. It's interesting how many Canadians are there. So it isn't just the recording industry. Let me ask you, Arctic issues. People, that's something people down here don't think about, but they're really important issues that Canada and the US need to work together on and manage. And we are dealing with Russia, China, Denmark, to be sure, because Greenland is Denmark. What's going on there? What do we need to know?
Well, that is actually an area that with this administration, we really got off quickly on working together to figure out the Canada-US cooperation up in the Arctic. So we work with the Arctic Council, which is the circumpolar countries. That work is largely focused on environmental protection, on communities, on also human security, because I'm sure, as you can imagine, we often have the need to for search and rescue and just getting up there and protecting communities from some of the challenges that they can face when they're in such a complicated and difficult environment. So we have this international organization that we work with, but we also are very keen to work with the US bilaterally up in the United States or up in the Arctic, because there are security issues involved and there are international defense issues involved. And that is a space that our Minister of Defense is very keen on working with his counterpart on in developing a strategy. And so the Prime Minister and the President actually tasked them to provide a comprehensive plan for the Arctic that includes things like mutual support and protection of communities, but also a strategic view on how we cooperate in Arctic governance and how we cooperate in defending our territories up there.
Yeah, we've talked, just for our audience, I've talked with the ambassador a few times. And one of the things that frustrates us, having served in this position, is people often forget this overarching partnership that's gone on for so long, a partnership that works, and they reduce it down to a pipeline or something. But we have a great energy relationship with Canada. You want to talk about that? It's just huge and important, and it defies being stigmatized by one pipeline disagreement or another. You want to mention it at all?
Yeah, I would. I think, and thanks for I'm just looking at a statistic here as we're talking. I think that, so the first thing I would say is that Canada is the largest energy supplier to the United States by far. And that energy that we supply, we think about fossil fuels, and fossil fuels is something that gets an awful lot of attention. But there's also hydroelectric energy. We have a strong relationship in nuclear energy, in wind technology, and working together on wind technology. So it crosses the gamut. Right now, of course, we are also very keen on working together to not only innovate, but develop complete supply chains around green energy, battery technology, using our resources such as critical minerals to make sure that we can reinforce our ability as two countries to transition towards a carbon-free economy. But in the meantime, and while that's happening, it's really important not to lose sight of the fact that the fossil fuel cooperation and between our two countries is essential. Canada is by far the best fossil fuel provider for the US. We're the biggest, and we provide the most. And by the way, you sell quite a bit of fossil fuels up into Canada too. We have 22, I think, pipelines, 7 of which, in fact, take product up into Canada. And all of this energy relationship represents almost $120 billion annually between our two countries. So it's a huge aspect of our bilateral economic relationship. And I think that what's special about the Canada-US energy relationship is that we're going to be able to move together in all aspects of energy production and usage in a way that supports our communities, supports our economies, but also where we have shared values around how to, as I say, transition to cleaner energy environment, but also make sure that we are independent energy-wise. So that, and that's essential from a national security perspective. What is, I think, very, very important for our countries is to make sure that we are the masters of our own energy supply so that we can count on each other for both economic and defense purposes.
Yeah, that's an important point. When I went to Congress in my childhood in 1975, if someone, we'd had the Arab oil embargo in 1973. There were long gas lines. People were worried that we were going to run out of oil and natural gas. And somebody had told me then that today, actually, it's been for at least now, probably at least 6 or 7 years during the Obama administration, we hit that point where we are energy self-sufficient, the US and Canada. That doesn't mean we won't export, import stuff because of the economies, but we are essentially energy self-sufficient. I never thought we would have that. We take that for granted, I think, in our wrangling over different issues. So, and you mentioned how much Canada provides the US with oil, natural gas, solar, wind, hydro. I think they're talking about a new transmission line across Lake Erie. I just read about that this morning. Canada is the largest provider of energy to the state of Michigan. Actually, one company, Enbridge, which I'm very familiar with, having worked with them, is the largest provider of energy to the state of Michigan. So it is something that we often take for granted, like our integrated auto industry, totally integrated. When Obama, Biden did the rescue of General Motors and Chrysler, Ottawa and Toronto pitched in with financing. And that's something that I don't think you worked on, but I know you're fully aware of it, the importance of the auto industry to our countries, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, again, I think that this is a moment in time. So maybe just to back up from your auto question, which I'm happy to answer, but let me just back up for a second. We are facing a very special time in the Canada-US relationship, in my opinion. It's a time where we have enormous potential to supercharge this relationship. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is we have leaders who know each other, who trust each other, who like each other, who have a good relationship. And as we were saying earlier, the whole relationship between our two countries rests on hundreds of thousands of interactions. It doesn't rest on the relationship between two individuals, but the tone at the top really does matter. So we have that in very important advantage right now. We also have two federal governments whose policies and visions are significantly aligned. Their priorities are significantly aligned, whether it's fighting COVID, whether it's their approach to economic recovery, whether it's their approach to climate change, whether it's their approach to international security issues and dealing with some of the trickiest issues that are facing us globally right now. very similar views on how to approach those. And third, we have a critical moment in time coming out of this pandemic where the choices that governments make in how to get their citizens and their communities, back on track and give them tools for success moving forward are very crucial. And we have an opportunity between our two countries to do that in a way that supports each other, that makes us more competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world, that makes us safer, that makes us more innovative, more educated, more relevant to what's going to, come about in the years and decades to come. It's a moment of potential deep cooperation and consolidation. And that gets me to the auto sector. Our auto sector is deeply integrated. And nobody knows that better than you do, Governor, given your history and your hometown. But we are also at a moment in time where the transportation sector, generally the auto sector in particular, is going to transform. And we're going to transform towards electrification. And Canada has a lot of technology, a lot of innovation. We have the minerals and some of the raw materials that are required for that kind of transformation. We have the relationships in the auto sector with the U.S., with our unions, with the U.S. that are essential to moving forward in that way. And the U.S. also has enormous innovation going on and thinking going on. And so one of our objectives between our two countries is to make ourselves sort of global leaders in this field, to make sure that we, again, support each other and that we enhance each other's efforts. And I think that's just one example, but clean energy is another example. Clean infrastructure is another example. Finding ways to come out of the COVID recession in a way that puts people who have been hardest hit by the COVID recession back on a footing that's going to allow them to succeed, because we all know that this pandemic has not affected everybody equally, right? And both of our governments are very focused on making sure that there are certain segments of our society that aren't completely left behind as we move out of this. So it's just a hugely important moment in time for us if we seize it and if we invest in it and if we make sure that we stay on track, as you said in your opening remarks, as sort of the best of partners and the closest of friends.
Well, I have a lot of other questions, but I think we're going to end on that high note. You've mentioned the tone at the top is important. You're part of that. We agree on that. It's a special moment. It's a special time. We're really lucky to have you helping lead the way. We're honored that you were part of this program. Thank you for being there at a very special time for all of us. Thank you again, and thanks to our listeners and observers.
Thank you, Governor. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I can't wait till we can see each other in person again soon. And thank you to your listeners, and thank you for this opportunity. It's been really fun.
Thanks again.